Okay,
All
it
right.
is 5 after. All right, and if other people jump, they'll jump. That'd be great. But this is my buddy Jeff Motske. Jeff and I played together 100 years ago over at Vanguard, and it's about looking around your living room, and that's about how big the school is. So we had a great team, a bunch of great guys that loved each other and played over their skis and had a great time. And we all knew that Jeff was going to be a financial guru because we named him the super genius of the team. His dad was a banker and all that. And so it has come true. Uh, so I know that Eric and Aaron, they know Jeff from our last retreat that we had back in Monterey. And so we're going to have Jeff is a financial advisor. He has a company called Trilogy, does super well there in Orange County, has written a book. I'm not sure if that was your first or your second book.
First, and I hope last. Right.
He's got himself a podcast, but you need to hear this. He loves the Lord and he serves him wholeheartedly with the gifts that he has. And he understands that. And he loves sports and he loves coaches and spouses. And that's why Jeff's going to be a mainstay in all of our FCA coach spouse weekends. Because of the wisdom that the Lord has imparted to him, he wants to share to you guys. And so I'm going to pray it up. And then Jeff, you got it. All right. God in heaven, you are good. And we desire to know you and to be good stewards with all the gifts that you give us, because you do give us all those good gifts. Bless Jeff tonight. Bless all of our friends that are here. We love you, Lord. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you for taking the time to join and learn about couples and money. But before I even say that, I just want to say thanks for the work that you guys do and teaching in athletics and coaching. I can tell you that my high school career, played 3 sports in high school, and the coaches that I had there, a couple of them had just tremendous impact on my life. And the stuff that you're doing, meeting with kids and working and mentoring and teaching them and all that is super powerful. My wife happens to coach women's varsity high school soccer. So I get a little feeling of that as being on the other side of it, as well as I'm good friends with one of the ADs locally down here, and just what everybody's dealing with right now. It's just crazy school wise. So thank you for the work that you're doing. And we'll talk about money and all that, but I just wanted to say that, again, the work that you guys do is meaningful, and it makes a huge impact on students' lives and athletics, and FCA is just a great organization overall. I've been supportive of PUP and the organization for years, and glad to get a chance to share with you guys tonight a little bit more. If you saw what I talked about in Monterey, you'll probably see some similar slides, but I changed it up, and since it's a smaller group as well, we can do a little Q&A and interaction too. So Pup, do I need to get a way to share screens with you, or how does that work? Just show me.
Sorry, yes, okay, so I just hit here, multiple participants can share simultaneously. So did that give you
Let me see.
option to share?
It did. Cool.
Okay.
All right. So can everybody see that? Just give me a quick thumbs up if you can. Cool. All right. Well, I'm not going to spend time talking about the company. This is about you guys and helping you when it comes to finance and money. And just briefly, why this is such an important topic and meaningful topic to me is that just couples argue about money and finances. And the more you argue about it, the more likely you're to have significant problems in your relationship. So my job as a financial advisor, been doing it for 30 plus years, is to reduce those arguments, give some good rules of thumb to work off of as a couple. And it's just like anything in sports, team-wise, if you're working together, the two people is going to help out. And my goal is to make sure people have a lifetime of financial happiness, wherever you are on this particular picture screen. We'll talk about kind of compatibility and relationships and money all the way through, from younger all the way to what I'll just call kind of the sandwich generation that I live in right now, with kids in college and elderly parents, and then obviously finishing well. I'll spend a little bit of time on that as well too. There is a quiz that I developed. It was actually part of the book, and you can go and do that. And I'll give you the website in a minute, but it's a quiz you take for free. And it essentially breaks down into 4 different categories of really what money and couples and compatibility is all about. It's planning relationships as far as what's going on. How do we put our accounts? Do we put them together? Do we keep them separate? The trust factor is part of the quiz. Believe it or not, hiding purchases is a big thing that goes on. Just an example of things that are there, and just trusting people with money and decision making. Lifestyle is part of it. You get a chance to grade each other on spending and saving, and then also talks about risk and risk tolerance and really where you are in that, and investing versus debt. And those are the main categories. You can go to the website, trilogyfs.com. Go to Insight and Tools, click on it. You'll take it. It's 35 questions, and then your spouse gets to take it, and then it marries the answers together and just gives you a score. And all you got to do is plug in your email address, and it'll give you that particular information. I think so often people say, hey, how did we do on the quiz? I mean, how compatible our answers are. I'll tell you right now, in doing research and studying and working with couples for decades, there's very few people that are on the same page financially with every aspect of their finances. It's just very unusual for that to happen. In general, you're going to have a household where one person's more likely to spend versus save. You're going to have one that's more likely to take more risk versus less. You're just going to have areas where you're not going to agree overall. And I think that's one thing that we do is just compare the answers and figure out where are the areas that we need to talk about. The other part about this is how do most people score? And again, I mentioned not that well, but from a step standpoint, it starts to give you an idea what are the next steps that you should take. Why I tell people to take this quiz, and we do this with every one of our clients that walks in, couples wise, is the first thing I tell people is it's going to pique your curiosity. You'll take this quiz, you'll finish the 35 questions, and there'll be something that you have never thought about, and your spouse has probably never thought about, but you'll say, I wonder how he or she answered that particular question. I wonder what they thought of this. And whatever it is, it's there. We do this, and people leave the office and they get back in the car and they say to themselves, how did you answer that question on charitable giving? Or how did you answer that question about maybe one of our parents having to live with us if they have a health issue? Or how did you grade me on saving and spending? It's fun, but at the same time, it'll pique your curiosity on how things were answered. The biggest thing that it does is it starts to promote what I'll call very productive conversations about finances and money. If you don't talk about finances and money, and you hide things and so forth, again, all kinds of challenges come up in a relationship and so forth. So you want to start promoting productive conversations. And I just say you start shifting the conversations to how are we doing? What can we be doing differently in this area? Or how can we do something different when it comes to debt or saving or spending? Or just the next one, which is kind of what I'll call goal planning. Well, what if we started doing this instead of that? In other words, what if we started planning and saving over here? We could do something to the house. Or, we've got kids, and what are we starting to think about as far as college and saving and planning in those particulars? And again, it just starts those particular conversations. I mentioned this earlier, but the number one reason for problems in relationships and really low scores is communication. This is not an easy topic for couples to discuss. Actually, studies show that religion and sex and politics are actually easier for a lot of couples to talk about than money when it comes to, and there's less arguments in that area. So it's really hard to talk about. I do something called a financial date night with my wife. We still do this regularly. We've been married now for 25 years. And we've gone on a date every single Wednesday night. It's kind of our date night. But once a month, we do it on finances. And we don't argue about the credit card bills. We don't argue about things in here and there. Predominantly, that discussion should be talked about kind of big picture things, from a financial date night perspective. What are the big things we should be thinking about? We've got kids, we want to plan for college, or we don't have kids yet. That's an area we want to talk more about. We want to talk about buying a house if we don't have a house, or maybe upgrading the house that we have already. Another big one is retirement. And my definition for retirement is it's financial independence. And it's the day that you wake up and work becomes an option. The day you wake up and you don't have to go to work anymore, you choose to go to work. And you may still choose to go to work. But what I always tell people is, wouldn't it be nice to have that point in time where you've got enough money saved up, you've got a pension, you combine all these together, and you no longer have to go to work anymore. And that's really the goal that I would tell anybody when it comes to their long-term planning, is that they are telling themselves that I want to get to a point where work becomes an option. Doesn't mean I won't work anymore. I might choose to do something different. I might choose to have a fun job, but I might do something different. And that's really one of those topics for financial date night. It's just, what does our life look like in the future? What are some of the big things that we want to do? Or the phrase that I use a lot with couples is, what's your financial why? I mean, what are the financial whys in your relationship that you may or may not talk much about? And then how are you doing at getting towards that financial why? Where are you in that process of getting towards that particular financial why? So communication, really, really important, hard to talk about. That's why I'm glad you're talking tonight about this. But when you leave, when we get off this thing, one of the takeaways is take that quiz, and you'll start to see some areas that you probably never discussed before that should be discussed, and just see where you land in all those particular categories. Another reason why that you have low scores is that there's a lot of poor financial habits in society. Studies just show that we are a spending type of society overall. And sometimes in a relationship, you're not going to score well if one of you's a spendthrift and the other one's a penny pincher, or vice versa, in particular if you don't agree on each other in those particular topics. But you'll talk about things like spending areas of travel. How much do you want to do today versus the future? Hard to travel these days. But again, when we get a chance to be able to travel again, what are the things that you want to do today? What's things that you want to do in the future? This is a question I ask people all the time, because everybody's definition is different. When it comes to shopping, what's your definition of a luxury? And you ask your spouse the same question. Well, what do you view as a luxury when it comes to shopping? And entertainment. These are areas that we tend to spend a lot on. We don't track the spending on it, and it starts to cause challenges overall in the relationship. The final one is really just a lack of a comprehensive financial game plan. I mean, if you're coaches, you always have game plans. You always have a strategy. You always have a game plan for success. It's really the same thing with financial planning, is you've got to have a financial game plan, and you've got to build that out. I'll show you a diagram that we use in a minute as far as what a financial game plan looks like today. But we talked about spendthrift for penny pinchers. This is another one that comes up a lot when I do questions and workshops as well. Do we have our accounts together, or do we separate them? And I can tell you statistically, there's no I in team. You will do much better in your relationship if you start to work to pool all of your finances together, in particular, your major goal and your major spending finances, but really work together as a team. But I'll give you one area that I like to tell couples to use, because I think one of the fears of pooling all the money together sometimes is, well, I want to have my own money to do some of my own things. I want to have my own freedom to do some of my own things. Well, I call this the 1% rule. And really what that is that you take whatever the household income is. So let's say the household income is $120,000 combined for the household. And you take 2% of that number, right? So $2,400, and you divide it in half. So 1% for each spouse. So each person has $1,200 that they can spend annually on whatever they want to spend on, really no questions asked. Obviously, ethics and morals and stuff come into play, but just they can spend on whatever they want to spend on, no questions asked. I prefer it in a scenario where it's more of a cash scenario, but you can do it in credit, whatever it is. But that's just a great rule of thumb. You're not going to wreck a financial plan by having that type of spending for a couple one way or another. The next question to ask yourself in this area is a spending cap. This is a great thing to think about in a financial date night. What is the amount of money that we should be able to spend on our own without having to ask our spouse about it? And this number varies depending on household income. It could be as low as $50 without having to ask a spouse, or less, or a spouse it could be $250 or $500 or whatever that number is. But have a number that you agree upon that makes sense, that we don't have to ask our spouse about before we go out and spend it, whatever that number is. So 1% rule for savings or for spending on whatever they want, having a spending cap on whatever makes sense for them as far as what they want to spend without any questions asked. These are great guidelines to use to solve the problem of, I want to have separate accounts. I want to have money here and there. I will tell you over and over again, if you're planning for financial success together, you may as well start pooling dollars together, thinking that way, in particular with stuff like retirement. If you don't know the other person's saving for retirement at all, or setting up money in those areas, how do you know they're saving something? Maybe you're doing all the saving, or neither one of you is doing saving. So you've got to talk about these things, and you've got to start figuring out how we're going to work together on that, as well as tying the risk to all of that too, and figuring out what is your household risk too. You've got individual risk tolerances and what you're comfortable with, but there's also the household as well. This is a question I tell people all the time: is pay yourself first. I think I don't know if you're just coaching, but if you're in education, you guys have things like 403B plans or 403B7 plans, or if you're maybe not in the private sector, it's a 401k plan. These are types of savings vehicles that automatically take money out of your checking account. I use the phrase, you're paying yourself first. In other words, it's coming out of your check before it comes into your checking account, before you can spend it. Ultimately, you want to get that pay yourself first number up to 15% of your household income. If you can get it up to 15% of your household income, especially at the ages that you are today, you're going to have financial independence at some point in the future, much, much sooner than your friends that don't follow these rules. So again, looking at that number, and you may say, Jeff, that is an awful big thing to swallow right now. We're living paycheck to paycheck. I don't know how we can get to 15%. It's one of those things you work towards. You start the plan, you say, okay, we'll start at maybe 4%. And then next year you go to 6%. And as you get a raise, you go to 10%. But getting yourself to that number of paying yourself first, in particular, utilizing those very powerful retirement plans, is an awesome way to get yourself way ahead of others. And it'll get you to financial freedom. It'll get you to that point where down the road, you'll have financial freedom. The other aspect of paying yourself first is really looking at cash flow. Look at the household income and look at cash flow. And it's really the famous budgeting word. In other words, that budgeting aspect. And I'll walk you through a simple budgeting tool through the process as well. So again, these are rules I want you to be thinking about overall. This is a chart that we put in front of our clients all the time. Where are you in the spending and saving area up here? Thought process. This is a great date night discussion. In other words, where you are in that area. It's a great thing to look at the quiz, how you graded each other in that area. Where are you in combining or separating your accounts? And if you're combining and separating your accounts, what are your goals? I always say too that as a couple, you need to know what your financial whys are. You can have your own individual financial whys. I want to save for this. And maybe somebody, your spouse is completely different than that. But if you've got one together that you're both working and saving for, whatever it is, and you build a game plan to save for it, and you start using things like paying yourself first towards that goal, whatever it is, maybe it's a home or a new home or whatever it is, you use that towards these goals, it starts happening. Because what starts happening when you pay yourself first and when you have goals that are important to you, then the spending starts to change. Because you start telling yourself, is this new outfit more important than us working towards a down payment on our house? Or is this new driver, I'm a big golfer, so if this new driver doesn't go any straighter after you get it out of the driving range area, but is that new driver more important than whatever our other financial whys are? And those are the decisions that you have to make on it. I see Pup smiling because I've seen his driver too before. It goes all over the place. But again, it's those are the questions that you start asking yourself, and it's a different conversation than it is if there's no understanding of what cash flow is and what that budgeting is. So if you start to look at where money is going, then you start to make different decisions on what's more important to the household and what's more important to you as a couple. And then that final rule is just that 1% and that spending cap. So this is another part that I talk about financial independence. Again, the day that work becomes an option. Budgeting and cash flow analysis, we'll talk about that particular piece. I always look at a financial plan and use myself as an advisor, as I'm kind of the general contractor helping somebody build their financial house, right? You can do this yourself too if you have the discipline and the time to do it, but having somebody that kind of coaches you, that's unbiased, that's your general contractor that helps you build that financial house. I'd highly encourage you to find somebody that you trust that makes sense for you to help you build out that particular financial plan. And a good financial advisor is going to do a very extensive cash flow analysis and budget analysis for you. They're also going to talk about goals in your life, whatever those are. And I call those the financial rooms in the house. They're going to talk about asset protection plan, which is life insurance type planning and protection for your household overall. There's nothing worse than having a good financial plan, having things going, and then all of a sudden something drastically happens to one or both of you, and especially if you've got kids, not having that stuff lined up can be tragic in those scenarios. And then finally, that 911 fund, which I call the emergency fund. So again, if you were to build this from the ground up, and you look at a cash flow analysis, and you're building a house, you want a good foundation, right? You want a good piece of land, and that's your household income. Now, I can't help you a lot probably on getting your household income up or down, but as you get raises and so forth, you're just continuing to tell yourself, what can I do to help grow my family household income? Once you've got that, and this is the first step one in budget analysis, you can do this literally on a yellow pad. You could do this on apps. You could do this in programs that we use all the time with our clients, but you track your family household income. Then you start to look at your critical expenses, and your critical expenses are not lifestyle things. Your critical expenses are essentially your rent or your mortgage payment, your transportation payments, your health or healthcare type of payments in those areas, and then your food type scenarios. And that's all in the critical pieces down here. This amount of money, or this, whatever this monthly number is, you want to make sure you have at least 3 months of that in a 911 fund or your emergency fund. So again, if your household expenses, let's just say that are critical expenses, are $3,000, you need to have at least 3 months. I like 6 months set aside in an account that's safe, so that if something were to happen to one or both of your incomes, that you've got money set aside to pay for your critical household expenses. Once you've figured out what those are, then you move into like the lifestyle ones. And this is the fun stuff. This is where we're spending our money from a fun standpoint, and does it make the most sense based on what our overall goals are? So again, this is the golf outings, the dining, the entertainment, the travel, just things that you like to do that are fun. And I always say you want to start asking yourself those questions. Am I doing the right areas? Am I hitting the right areas overall in these particular pieces with the fun in that area? And then you got your primary goals, which again gets back to the rooms in the house. And then finally, that asset protection. You got to have insurance in those areas that make sense too. So what does a budget do for a couple? Number one, 70% of households don't operate on one. What's really ironic is most people start operating on a budget when they get close to retirement. It's very strange. I'll have people come in that we've never met before. They're coming in, they're getting close to retirement, and say, yeah, we ought to start doing one of these budgets. And my first response is, this is something you should have been doing decades ago. If you know where your money is going, you know where your expenses are going, it just helps you provide a blueprint for really what's going on in your overall financial house. I talked about financial transparency. This is one of my, I used to say jokes all the time. I used to have people raise their hand, but believe it or not, guys hide more things than women when it comes to money and expenses. Old Reader's Digest survey, but it really hasn't changed. I've done lots of interviews with couples, and yes, we tend to hide a few things here and there from our spouses, and that's not healthy. That's not good overall for a relationship either. I just want to shift gears a little bit into planning discussions and today and tomorrow and future. And I always start with something called the game Monopoly. If you saw this before, you'll know where I get at. But this is really, and everybody's played this game, I assume, at some point. Back in the 90s, the 100th millionth game of this was sold, about 100 million. And so this game has literally been played billions and billions and billions of times. And we all know the goal is to get hotels and get houses and buy railroads and obviously bankrupt everybody else that you're playing against and collect the most money. But my question always is to people is, this number down here is going around go. And nobody ever gets this right when I raise it in their hand, but it says it right on the board here. But if you go around go, you get $200. And this game was built back in 1934. That was your salary back in 1934. And I've always said, is there anybody that you know that's ever won this game by just going around go and collecting Monopoly? In other words, collecting their salary. In other words, never purchasing anything. All they ever did was just collect their money and so forth. Eventually, what happens? They're going to lose because they got to start paying other people's rents and bills and on and on and on. And I always say, my kids, we split my kids quite a bit. One of my kids used to kind of not spend near as much, not make as many decisions on buying things and buying houses and hotels. And the other one kind of mortgaged everything. In other words, was always buying everything they possibly could. And really what it comes down to is either strategy can work, but what it comes down to is to really have financial success, it comes down to making good financial decisions. And you have to take some investment risk. You've got to take some risk. You've got to make decisions on what you want to do with your money. You've got to make decisions. Do I want to buy property? Do I want to buy houses? It's the same thing with your own financial household. You have to make financial decisions and they're based off of your personal risk tolerance as well. Now, we use a questionnaire that we use with our clients. There's lots of these online as well that you can use overall, but this is something that gives you scores and ratings and really helps us understand where you are when it comes to risk. I can tell you that this is an important thing to be thinking about because the main key to financial success for longer term planning is financial behavior and decision making. In other words, it's getting the emotions out of the investment side of it. And that's hard to do when you've got access on your phone, you've got access here, every radio thing's on, if the market's going up or down, it creates this sensitive emotions, and people sometimes want to jump off the investment roller coaster when it's still riding. And that's just not good strategy overall and long term. But again, you've got to make decisions. They've got to be based off of risk tolerance that makes sense for you. I want to talk briefly, and then we'll just open up for some Q&A about the future. And when it comes to financial readiness, the mindset and the legacy, I think that makes sense when it comes to spouses and when it comes to planning today, but also the financial independence future side of it as well. The financial readiness, the when and how for people that's there. I think so many people underestimate what it's like when it comes to making decisions in retirement. And I realize you're younger and so forth, but you may have parents that are in these scenarios. But it's certainly things to be thinking about too. In other words, what it's going to be like for you guys when it comes to financial readiness. There's a strong disconnect with couples when it comes to retirement. 62% don't even agree on retirement ages. One of you may be saying, I want to retire when I'm 50 or younger. One of you may say, I don't ever want to retire because I love my job. I love the work that I'm doing. Most of them don't have a retirement plan at all or a detailed plan at all. They don't agree on whether they want to continue to work in retirement, and they don't even really know what their lifestyle expectations are when it comes to retirement. I've had couples come in and one say, I want to retire and I want to travel all over the country in a Winnebago and see all the national parks. And the other one's like, where did that come from? I don't want to do any of that. I just want to spend time in Hawaii. I want to go do this. I want to go do that. But it's all, they're all over the map. And again, this is good financial date night discussion. These are discussions to think about, like, what have you thought about retirement? Have you thought about where this might be? Have you thought about what this might look like? What do we want to do? And again, getting those financial whys in scenario. But there's so many people that just don't understand the when and the how side of it. There are two fundamental fears when it comes to people moving towards retirement or in retirement. And you may have parents or grandparents in these particular scenarios, but the number one fear is running out of money. The number two fear is becoming a burden on loved ones. And both those things, a lot of times with good planning, you can take away both those fears and have a good fully funded plan for people in that area too. The other thing I'll say too, when it comes to financial readiness, is that there are many people out there, and again, maybe it has to be strange with going on work-wise and education and so forth. It's got to be, and you're saying, I don't, this is driving me nuts, and I just want to quit. I want to get out of this at some point down the road. It just, versus continuing to work forever. And I will tell people too, that when it comes to retirement, when it comes to planning, comes to saving, you really want to plan out. Do I just want to stop and be done and move on, or do I want to wind it down? Most people, most Americans, have a much better success when it comes moving into that next transition in their life if they wind things down versus just quitting their job cold turkey and saying, I'm done. I just want to go enjoy golf and travel and all those things that happen as well. The other one is, are your spouse and you in alignment when it comes to these things? Again, a lot of disconnect here when it comes to people moving into those areas, duties and responsibilities. If you're both working, what are the duties and responsibilities in the house that goes on? If one of you stops working and one of you goes part-time, maybe you pick up the slack in those areas. Again, good things to be talking about over time. Are you in alignment on your times? I always say too, and I think this is true, not even in retirements today. I think it's very important for couples to have your time, my time, and our time relationship wise. I mentioned a date night. My wife and I, every Wednesday night we go out. That's certainly our time. But there's other things that we like to do that we like to do individually. And it's the same thing when it comes to your money and your finances. Again, what are things that we want to spend on that's together that bring us both enjoyment? What are things that maybe bring you personal enjoyment or the other one personal enjoyment, but really asking yourself those particular questions when it comes to the alignment aspect of it. And then finally, again, this may seem far down the road, but finishing well and legacy type of work, proper estate planning is really important. And if you have kids, here's a phrase, if there's anything to leave on estate planning is if you have kids, you need an estate plan. Because if you don't have one, the government's got one for you and you're not going to like it. You need to have healthcare directives, some of those things. I know you say this isn't going to happen to me and God forbid it does. And I've seen it happen. It's really important to have these documents in place, and it just takes some time. And again, some conversation between the two of you on like what this looks like overall, but having a proper plan in place for yourself is really important. If you've got kids, that's the biggest thing too. But then asking yourself, what does your legacy want to be like? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be known for at school when you retire out? What are things that are important to you overall too? And again, two people working together beats two individuals every time when it comes to planning and saving. So my takeaways before we go to just any questions that might come up, continue to educate yourself. Things like this are just a starting point for people. Again, taking that quiz is a great way to get started. If you're already working with an advisor, you should be asking them questions about budget, cash flow planning, all those particulars. If that's not happening, either find another advisor or tell them, hey, I want some more help in these particular areas. I want some help in really putting a financial plan and a financial game plan together for you. Ongoing communication, financial date night. I will just tell you that that's one of the key things in my wife and I's relationship. But it's been so powerful with all the couples that I've worked with. At Trilogy, we have 20,000 families, individuals, and businesses that we help daily. And they will come in and tell us, hey, we were on our financial date night and this particular question came up, Jeff. How do you want to answer this? Or how would you answer that? Or we were on our date night, we were talking about this. What do you think in this particular area? And then I think just building that plan together and just very thoughtful decision making. I think one thing about money and finances, it's not a short-term race. It's a marathon. And it's one of those things that it's just the more decision making that you make, the more you're educated, the more emotion that's not involved when it comes to money and finances. I promise you, the better off you're going to be. And then finally, just like you guys, I think you want to hire a coach that's got your back. Again, we do this work all the time. We work in the Zoom land with clients and so forth. I've got a partner, Nick Delafu, that solid Christian guy, huge believer that works with me down in Huntington Beach, and we do Zoom meetings with people. So if you want help in these areas, we can connect you that way. If you want to be more locally, I totally get that as well. Just make sure that you're working with somebody that's a fiduciary. That's one of the few questions I would ask an advisor before to work with them is, do you act as a fiduciary? And that phrase means that they have to act in your best interest at all times. That's not true with people that are in the insurance space sometimes, or even in the brokerage space or in areas. We're a fiduciary firm, which means we have to act in somebody's best interest at all times. It's the highest standard out there. And that's the one question I would make sure that whoever you're working with is working and has to act in that capacity for you. So on that, I'll stop. Pup said about 25 minutes. I think we're right on about 25 minutes. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take that. Otherwise, it's Sunday evening, and I don't know what else is on the docket for everybody. But thank you for your time.
Awesome, Jeff. All right, here we go. Who's got questions? I know I got some.
Do you want to keep sharing your screen, or would you want to?
Well, I can get rid of it.
Okay.
We don't need to see Zoom. You guys seen enough Zoom in your life, I'm sure, teaching and everything else going on.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
And I know that Pup has already kind of talked with you and things, but just for even the couples here that are on the call tonight, Like, how much does it cost for your services? Or maybe just kind of in general to consult like a financial advisor?
Yeah. A fiduciary advisor is going to charge you one of two ways. They're going to charge you a flat planning fee. And it's like, think of it as like a, like a Spotify or a gym membership or whatever. And that's the only fee they're going to charge you. And that flat planning fee covers retainer work, questions, planning, anything. Our minimum flat planning fee is $800 that we charge an advisor to do that type of work, or they'll charge you for investment management. And that investment management fee is something, again, that they'll charge you based off of the amount of money that they're actually managing. And usually it should be no more than 1% of whatever that number is. But if you have significant amount of assets, it will be a lot less than that. So, and then if somebody has $250,000 that is with us, we don't charge any flat planning fees at all. So we waive all of those particular fees. That's kind of a standard for fiduciary type of RIA type of work for as far as financial planning goes. I think another one is estate planning fees, because that question comes up a lot too. You know, can I do this online? I kind of hit pretty hard on the trust thing because it is an important thing if you've got kids. If you're paying less than $1,000, you're probably not getting the right type of estate planning advice. It's a one-time cost usually, and it should be anywhere from, it's geographically based a little bit, but say $1,500 up to, they can be as high as $5,000. But a lot of times people think I can just do this online or I can plug it all in. Again, we don't do estate planning work at all. This is just my recommendation on getting the right type of an attorney that can do the work for you the right way. And it's the same thing with us. It's kind of, you get it going, you get the plan in place, and then that's it.
Jeff, let me ask a question. We got a bunch of young couples here.
Yep.
And Lewis's especially, they got young kids, and
yep.
Kevin, they're going to have kids soon. How did you talk to your kids about money, purpose of it, legacy? What did that look like?
You know what? That is super important. Your kids, just like they follow and watch you on everything else, they follow and watch what you do with money too. As it doesn't take long for them to start figuring out, like, what does that credit card mean, mom, dad, what is it? And if it gets viewed as like, you're just flying it out there all the time and you don't explain what it is, that a credit card is a 30-day loan, really what it is at best. If you can't pay it off, you really shouldn't be using the credit card. And you explain to your kids what that is. See, I give this credit card out, I get a bill at the end of the month, and then my responsibility is to pay that bill off at the end of the month. If I don't pay that bill off, they're going to charge me interest. Well, then the next natural question is, Dad, what's interest? Well, interest is if you have $1,000, or let's just keep it for kids' sake, $100, and they're charging you 18% interest, they're going to charge you $18 to keep that $100 balance, and you have to it just keeps adding up on top. Well, that doesn't seem like a good deal. You're exactly right. That's why you pay it off. If you pay off the $100, then you don't have the $18 interest charge that's there. So, I mean, that's a great example. We also did kind of payday in our household. So when our kids were younger, they would get a little envelope with cash in it. That was their spending money for the week, right? And then we ended up doing it every 2 weeks for essentially just things around the house that they did. And they got used to that payday. And then we started talking about payday and saving and putting the money away. I call it the Motske matching plan in the book. But whatever money that they put away, we would match like 25 cents on the dollar of whatever they put into the bank. So whatever they saved, we would start putting money in, much like a 401k or a 403b, or those plans that you have through your work. We were teaching them that idea of saving and putting money away. And both of our kids are excellent savers. And I think it comes a lot with, I think, their dad obviously being big in budgeting and financial planning and all that. But it's also the fact that we were teaching them along the way, the things that are there. And then you teach them too, why do you keep putting money in the basket at church, Dad? Or why do you do a check over at church? What is that? Well, you start talking about that. Why you're doing those particular things. Kids are sponges. And my other thing would be, if you're not teaching your kids about money, somebody else is, or they're learning about it online, and it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good. They really, really rely on us to teach them things in life, and money is no different.
Anybody else?
When discussing the 15% household income, as far as putting money away, does that include STIRS as part of that, or is that on top of STIRS?
Great question. You guys have a real benefit in STIRS. What I would tell you is you can add that in to start, Eric. But what I would tell you over time is to go beyond that. It's the same thing with, well, I put money away for Social Security, or I put money away for that. And it's true. And I think Social Security is going to be around for us. Don't let people scare the heck out of you that it's there. But we always look at Social Security in particular as like a bonus over and above when it comes to retirement, and extra money put away when it comes to retirement. But STIRS is much more than a Social Security benefit as far as pension, type aspect of it. Great question. The other part about it is if you put the 15% away into your own accounts, you control the investment options. So. How many teach? I'm just curious. All right, cool. So five out of 6. All right. Well, and the work you do, my sisters teach. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the classroom, because I was just at dinner with my sister and for her birthday, and she was talking about all the Zoom classes, and she's got 38 kids in Zoom and trying to take roll and keeping track of all the kids and what's going on. And half of them have left by the end of the class. And she said, it's just been really, really challenging overall. And she says one guy teaches PE and there's 70 kids in PE, and trying to track all the kids doing, and it's just crazy. So boy, I hope we can get back to getting the kids in the classroom as soon as possible, and obviously getting sports up and running. My daughter plays golf and soccer in college, and my son plays golf in college. So I've been blessed with golf, because it is one of the few sports that they've been allowing to play, the kids to play school wise. But but God bless you guys for the teaching. It's hard work.
Jeff, you made a reference to the investment ride.
Yeah.
And hanging on. So what did you kind of unpack that?
I always look at, again, you guys are young and you have tremendous purchasing power in putting money into the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ and these indexes, right? That if you look historically, there's no greater investment vehicle over decades of time. But that being said, there's significant drops, ups and downs, or what you classify as bear markets. I mean, the COVID one was the most recent one. We had that 30% drop. I mean, really quickly. Well, if you're on the roller coaster and you got out at the bottom, you lost a lot of money. I mean, a lot of purchasing power. On the other hand, if you say, hey, I'm not retiring until 2032, whatever the date is, the market roared back in 50 days. But the hard part is not jumping off the roller coaster when it's doing that, right? I mean, I've been on TV for CNBC and all that stuff, and you're a rock star when you're on there talking about when the markets are going crazy. The TV's tuned on, everybody's excited, emotions, fear, and there's a lot of selling and people making poor decisions because they're watching screens instead of really thinking about their long-term strategy. And that's where I think, I tell our advisors all the time, this is when you get paid to work with your clients. Is when the markets are down, you need to be talking to them the most. And our industry does not do a good job of that. Usually when the markets are down, our advisors are hiding because they don't want to talk, because they think their clients are going to be upset. We coach the exact opposite. We say, no, this is exactly what we talked about, Mr. and Mrs. Client. This is maybe an opportunity to put more money in, but we don't want to get off the roller coaster right now. We want to stay on it. And I always say we want to ride it kind of the boring way, where it's kind of slowly going up and down. And then, as you get closer to retirement, then you got to start thinking differently about the stock market and equities and your investments. Again, it's the decisions that you make along the way. But when you're young, the more you can put that 15% away at that clip, I promise you'll be very happy down the road. If you look at just what $10,000 in the S&P did, and then you look at 30 years down the road, what it's worth, people are shocked when I show them the power of compound interest and how it all works.
I love that phrase, the power of compound interest.
Yeah.
Especially because I'm looking at these young cats, and then for them to do that, and it's just going to be such a benefit for them.
Yeah. If there's anything I would say, I mean, it's hard sometimes to do the budgeting aspect of things for couples. I get it. And here's what we tell exercise wise. We say, look, get your credit card statements out, get your bank statement out. If you use cash, get all that out and just sit down and have a discussion between the two of you and start to figure out where your money's going. And I always say, most people now, they use a lot of credit cards. Take 3 highlighters. Take a green highlighter and highlight everything on your credit card bills that are just kind of essential expenses. You know, again, if you're paying your electrical bill that way, whatever you're paying that is kind of those critical expenses. And then take the yellow one and highlight all the ones that are lifestyle expenses. And then take, I always say a red one. It's not really a highlighter, but those are the dumb, frivolous ones. So the things that you really aren't getting any joy out of. Maybe it's a monthly subscription you're just not even using anymore. And you'll really start to add all that up, and you can get to that 15% a lot faster than you think. And you also start to ask yourself, are these things that important to us overall? Or gosh, if we just made this minor adjustment over here, look what would happen over here. And you start doing the math on these different areas, and it starts to change things dramatically. And I always tell too, that once you start seeing a plan, and we use something called e-money, it's a planning software. But once you start seeing a planning portal and you start seeing what it looks like, and you're seeing your net worth start to climb because you're saving, and you see your net worth climbing because if you own a house, that's all plugged in there as well. It starts to change the mindset of, why am I working so hard? Or why am I doing all these other things? Or, why it starts to change your mindset a lot faster.
Okay, 9 minutes left. Anybody else?
So Jeff, I like the 3 highlighter drill. I think we're going to use that. A question that I have as far as trying to get involved with someone, what would be the best way to do that, to seek interest? We've done that here in town, haven't been happy with the results. And so we have been actively trying to seek out better advisement. What are your thoughts on how to do that, how to go about that?
Yeah. Well, if you want somebody locally, you want to Google or look for independent RIA type people, independent registered investment advisor type. That's the first phrase. You can also go to the CFP board, right? Certified Financial Planning Board. That's another very hard designation to get. It's like 2 days of just torture taking tests. I took it a long time ago, but it was torture. But again, so those are areas, and those people have to act in a fiduciary capacity. So that's the number one question I would ask anybody that you interview is, do you work in a fiduciary capacity for me? And then if the answer is yes, then it just comes down to connection and personality. In other words, do you connect? And I think that's so important. I tell people all the time, I have to like you and you got to like me, or it's just not going to work. I mean, I've been very candid with you saying, look, I'm probably not a good fit for you, but this person might be very good. Interview this person and this person and this person. And they might be, but I really think money's too personal to me. It's just, it's something that it's personal, and you need an advisor. You have just that type of trust, and that you can call up and they're your first phone call when a money question comes up. And that's where, again, our coaching, and again, our flat fee, you can call anytime. It's not like that you get 1 meeting a year or 4 meetings a year. You just call and somebody will be there to answer your question, whatever that particular question is. And to me, that's what I tell people all the time is find somebody that's a fiduciary, investment advisor, registered investment advisory firm. And there's got to be some up in your area too. But that's where I'd start. I'm happy to Google around and find some people for you guys too up in that area. We do have advisors that travel and go all over the place. I don't know how many that go up as far north, but we have an office in Woodland Hills. So
6 minutes. Anybody else?
All right, I have one question. So if you're kind of getting started in like initial investments, what would be your, I guess, like big tip?
Well, you're all teachers, so hopefully you're utilizing the plans through work, the 403Bs, the 403B7s. I don't know who your carriers are in your districts, but that's kind of important to know too. That's a great place to start. The next step beyond that would be to utilize, I would be a Roth IRA, right? If you haven't heard of those, super powerful savings tool. You guys are going to qualify for them at some point in your life. You may not qualify for them because they're income based. So open up a Roth IRA. If you're just saying I'm just starting out, go to like a TD or a Schwab. And just start putting in the minimum monthly amounts in there that they'll do, and just pick an S&P index, IVV, an S&P index, and just start out saving and planning in that particular. But a Roth IRA is a great place to get started, because taxes are not going to go down. They're not going to go down, and they're not going to go down in your retirement. In particular, when you guys have pensions, and I think, I always tell teachers, it's a great savings vehicle. But there is a little bit of what I call pension risk. And when I say pension risk is that, maybe they won't be able to pay the exact amount that they promised you over time through the program. I'm not saying it's going to go bankrupt, but, there are other scenarios, in other states where they have not followed through on the pensions exactly what people have said, or they change them over time. And you're young enough that they may change them to the point where you may not get quite the benefits that were expected. So when you can layer in a Roth IRA, and when you can layer in a 403B plan of some sort on top of that, it helps diversify your overall future income. But I would start with a Roth. Because then the thing about Roth is you can pull money out of it to buy a house if you want to do that. And without penalties, you can take the principal out of it. It's got a lot of flexibility. And I think for me, when it comes to really, really planning financial independence, you want 3 buckets of money. Number one is you want a tax-free bucket of money when it comes to retirement, and that's your Roth IRA or your Roth 403B plan. The second one you want to have is a tax-deferred bucket of money, and that would be more of your pensions and more of a 401k or 403B, again, where it's just deferred. In other words, you're going to have to pay taxes on it when you pull it out in retirement. And the final bucket you want to have is a capital gains bucket, this is now individual securities, individual stocks and bonds, where the growth is not taxed at all until you sell it. And when you sell it, it's taxed at a capital gains rate, which is say 15% versus your personal income tax rate, which may be 25 to 30 when you look at the state of California and the federal government combined. Those 3 buckets of money give you ultimate flexibility when it comes to retirement. Gives you ultimate flexibility. So if you can start saving a little bit in each of those 3 different types of buckets, the better. Why I like the Roth so much is you may not qualify for it later. It may go away later. It's not been around all that long. And if it goes away, you're going to want to have that grandfather bucket of money that you can tap into tax-free.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?